Today I'm going to be working on the Miles of Tiles half pack quilt by the Sassy Sunflower. If you do not know what a half pack is, this is what it looks like. It is 5 half-yard cuts of fabric already coordinated for you, so it makes it super easy to put a quilt together. And with each half pack that you purchase, you get to choose a Sassy Sunflower pattern to go along with it. Any of the Sassy Sunflower patterns can be made using any half pack fabric kit. So when you do this particular tutorial, you will need to get a half pack and you will need to request the Miles of Tiles half pack pattern with it. I will not be giving you the exact dimensions of what you need to be cutting. So you will need that pattern in order to get those, as well as the diagram in order to put it all together. But I'll be giving you some little tips and tricks and showing you some of the ways that I have found it really easy to put this quilt together. All right, if you do not have a half pack and you need to purchase one, there are half pack dealers throughout the US and Canada. If you do not have one near you, you can check our website, sassysunflowerquilts.com, and look at our locator page. It lists all the different shops throughout the country, and most are selling them not only in their brick and mortar store, but also online. So you can pick up a half pack very easily through our website or through your local dealer. All right, so you need the half pack plus the Miles of Tiles pattern to do this tutorial. Some other supplies that you'll need to get. You'll need to make sure that you have a rotary mat that's safe to use with a rotary cutter. You will need, of course, a rotary cutter. And for this tutorial today, I'm going to be using a 60mm rotary cutter because all of these fabrics can be cut together in a stack for your first cuts, which is really easy. It makes it super quick and easy because all 5 fabrics are going to be cut the exact same way. So I would like a bigger rotary cutter for this because it just cuts through multi-layers much faster. Also, you will need some type of a ruler. I like to use a 7 to 8 inch ruler by 24 inches. And the reason I like the longer rulers for this is because the first cuts in this pattern are long cuts. And it's easier to do with a long ruler than scooting your ruler back and forth. You just have more room for error if you're scooting it back. Can you use a smaller ruler? Sure you can. Just a little bit easier and more accurate, I feel, if you use that larger 24-inch long ruler. Also, you're going to need some type of either fabric clips or pins because we are going to be clipping some blocks together and some strips so we can keep it all straight when we go to the sewing machine. You will need, of course, your sewing machine, sewing supplies, an iron, that type of thing, just general sewing supplies. And for this particular pattern, I find it really helpful to have either scraps of paper, or I like to use these little sticky notes for one of the steps that we're going to do a bit later, and a Sharpie. You can use scraps, as I said, of paper. You could use a little piece of masking tape and some type of writing implement. But that will be helpful when we're trying to put the quilt together and lay out the diagram for this quilt. All right, so gather your supplies, and then we're going to be back and open up the half pack, and I'll show you how I get started. All right, so I am using a really cute Christmas half pack for the Miles of Tiles today. These are Moda fabrics, which I think are super cute. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to open it up and get all 5 fabrics. And I want to keep them together. I'm going to open these little flaps up like that and open the fabric up and lay it out flat. Now, as I said earlier, I am going to go ahead and make the first few cuts in this tutorial with all 5 fabrics stacked on top of each other. All right, so I've got a new blade in my 60mm rotary cutter, so it should be good to go for that many layers. And what I want to do, because this needs to be very, very accurate, I'm going to go to my ironing board and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press out all of these creases. It's folded so cute when you get it in the package, but it does, when you open it up, leave some creases. And I want to make sure that all of these creases are pressed out because I want to lay this perfectly flat for my cutting. So open up your half pack, open up all of your fabrics, press them, stack them, and we'll be back to make our first cuts. All right, so as I said, I'm going to be cutting all of these fabrics, all 5 fabrics, all at the same time. We're going to be making 3 large cuts in the full length of the fabric in all 5 fabrics. Now, you don't have to do them all together. If you're not comfortable cutting all of them together, that's fine. You can do them individually. If you don't have a 60 millimeter rotary cutter, I would recommend doing them maybe 2 at a time with a 45, because a 45 really can't, even with a sharp blade, has a hard time going through 10 layers of fabric. So what you're going to do is lay them all out, whichever way you choose, either all together or individually, and you're going to make the 3 large cuts in this fabric. That's going to give you 3 equal strips. And just be aware that you don't want to cut a bunch off at the front on the one side to even everything up. Make sure your fabrics are even, and maybe make a very, very small cut just to make sure everything's even. I can show you how small of a cut I made. It was very, very small. I just cut off just a little bit on this side just to make sure everything was even for a starting point. And go ahead and make those cuts in your fabric. 1, 2, and 3 cuts. And just so you know, when I made my cuts, this is how much fabric was left at the end. So it's very, very small. So you need to be very sure. I'm sure you've heard the expression, measure twice, cut once. So when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we're doing that. We don't want to have to even it up again, because it won't be enough fabric at the end to do that. So make your 3 cuts, and then we're going to pull all the fabrics from the same fabric, and we're going to put them all together. So we're going to have separate stacks of each of our fabrics. Okay. So whichever way you choose to do this, if you do cut them all together, this makes really, really quick prep, cutting prep for this quilt. All right, so we're going to get all 5 fabrics, all stacks of each of the 5 fabrics with the strips. Now, the next thing on the instructions are, we need to take each one of these stacks to the ironing board, and we are going to cut these completely open. So we're going to need to open them up like this for cutting. So what I want you to do is take all of these stacks over to the iron and press out that center, the center fold, okay? We want it to lay nice and flat when we're cutting so we have the most accurate cuts we can. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to go ahead and press all those folds open, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about exactly what you need to do as far as subcutting each one of these strips. So I've pressed the fold out of each of these strips. I'm going to start with this. This will be my A fabric. I decided to start with the snowmen just because they're so stinking cute. All right, so we are going to cut these fabrics, these strips. We're going to subcut each of these, and we're going to open them up. These are not folded. They are opened out flat when we're cutting them. And the instructions are on the pattern of exactly how large you need to cut these, or how you need to subcut these. I will tell you that the first and second strip are cut exactly the same, okay? So you're going to be cutting one large strip out of this, and then a bit of a shorter medium length strip. And then for the third strip, you're going to be cutting this into some smaller strips and several squares. Okay, and those instructions are all completely laid out very clearly in the pattern. There's a diagram, a drawing. It's very, very easy to follow. So what I want you to do, and what I'm going to do, is I'm going to take each of my fabrics separately, and I'm going to cut out all the strips, subcut each one of these very long strips. I'm going to subcut it as directed in the pattern, and I'm going to still keep all of my fabrics, same fabrics together. So I'm going to keep all the snowmen together, keep all the plaid together, and then I'm going to show you what I do to mark them, which makes it much easier when we're laying this quilt out. All right, you should have all of your strips subcut, and go ahead and put all of your like fabrics together. So you have all the rectangles and squares for each fabric together. Okay, this is mine for my A fabric. What you should have after you've subcut everything is 2 very long rectangles, 2 of the next size smaller, and then 2 of the smallest rectangles. Okay, and then you should have 3 squares. Okay, and you should have the same amount of each of the fabrics. All 5 are exactly the same. All right, now here's where it's important. We talked about it before. Here's where it's important for you to identify which fabric is which. So you need to label them. This is my A fabric, which I said before, and this is one of the ways you can do it. I just take a little piece because there was some extra when I was subcutting. There was a little bit on the ends. So I just tape a piece of those fabrics onto just a regular old piece of paper and identify them by A, B, C, D, and E. This is super important for what we're going to be doing next for setting up the layout and getting that all set up. So this is a way to identify each of your 5 fabrics by letter. Now, I suggest, and I know that the pattern suggests, that you actually take this a step further and you take the little sticky notes that I talked about, or scrap paper, whatever you've got, masking tape, and go ahead and write on the sticky notes the letter and then the size of each of the blocks. Okay, I'm not going to give those sizes to you for this tutorial because that is copywritten, so I cannot share that, but all of that information is in the pattern. So you'll find that under number 2 on the front page of the pattern. It'll tell you exactly how to make these sticky notes and put them on. So you would put one on each of the sizes, the A, and then the size of the block, A, size of the block, and so on for these. And then go ahead and do that for each corresponding, go with B and the size of the blocks. It makes it so much easier when we're going to be doing this layout. So go ahead and identify all your blocks, whichever way you choose. And then we're going to need to clear a space, either on a large table, maybe a space on the floor, where we can go ahead and lay out our blocks. When you flip the pattern over onto the second side, you will see the diagram of exactly how this quilt is laid out as far as which strips go where. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and flip that over and start to lay out the fabrics. It's kind of like quilt by number, right? Remember when we used to do paint by number and there would be a little spot and it would say, like whatever number 1, and you painted all the ones white, and then you painted all the greens, number 6 with all the greens. This is kind of like quilt by number, kind of like that, because you've got all of your blocks and all of your strips identified, and you will find corresponding numbers to those on the back of the pattern in the diagram. So all you have to do is lay out the corresponding block where it belongs in this diagram. So I'm going to let you go ahead and clear a spot, start to lay that out, and I'm going to lay mine out, and then we'll get back to you. I'll show you exactly how it looks, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the best way to get these strips sewn together so we keep it in the order that we intended. All right, so I have mine all laid out on a table. This is what it looks like. Okay. And don't worry, I know you have extra blocks from each of the colors. That is okay. Just set those aside because we're going to use those for our border here in just a minute. What I want you to do is take your first row on the left-hand side. We're going to talk about how we're going to put this together. So grab your clips and we'll be right back to talk about how we're going to put each row together long ways from top to bottom, and then we're going to sew them together from left to right. So we're going to start with the first row on the left, and I'm going to show you what I do to make sure that all of these blocks that I've painstakingly put together in the correct place stay there. All right, so now we've got to get all these rows of strips over to our sewing machine and make sure that they stay together in the correct order so that our quilt looks right when we get it finished. What we're going to do is, as I said, we're going to do the row 1 first on the left from top to bottom, and we're going to do all of those rows top to bottom, and then we'll sew each row together from left to right. All right, so this is my first row, and this is my first fabric. I take the second fabric and I go ahead and I just clip it. So I know I've got to put a seam there. Then I take the other end of this and my next color, my next block goes on here, and I just go ahead and clip that as well. And then the final one for that row is right here. Now you can go row to row. You can clip all of your rows together and take them all to the sewing machine at once, as long as you're keeping them in order. I like to do them one row at a time because I want to make sure that all of my strips stay in the correct order so that my quilt looks right at the end. So whichever way you'd like to do it, if you pin it, if you clip it, however it is that you find it's easiest to keep everything in order, we're going to go ahead and sew all of those long strips top to bottom. There's 7 rows of them. I'm sorry, there's 8 rows of them. And we're going to sew all of those together. And then once we have all those sewn, we're going to press the seams to one side and lay them all out. And then we're going to start on the left-hand side and we're going to sew the strips together from left to right. And that will give us the center of the quilt. I'm going to go ahead and sew my blocks together, sew my rows together, top to bottom, then side to side. And once it's all together, I'll come back and we'll talk about what we're doing with all those leftover blocks that we have and how we're going to make that into a really super cute border. right, so we have all of our strips put together, top to bottom. We've put the entire center of the quilt together with all the rows together, both first top to bottom and then side to side. Now it's time to do the border. We're going to use all of those blocks that we had left over, and we're going to go ahead and turn over to the second page of the pattern on number 2. It's going to tell you the exact dimensions to subcut these remaining blocks into. You cut all of them into those sizes, and I'll show you what you're going to end up with. Is you're going to end up with some little skinny rectangles, okay? And we're going to put them end to end. You can do this in whatever order you'd like. You can do it scrappy, you can do them in order, however you like it, that's absolutely fine. And you're going to sew them a 1/4 inch seam between all of them, and then just continue that in one great long strip. Okay, then press all of your seams to one side, and your border strip is ready to be put on your quilt. First, put it on the top using a 1/4 inch seam, along the bottom with a 1/4 inch seam, and then on the left side and the right side. Press your quilt, and the quilt is all ready to go to the quilters. This is actually a very quick quilt to cut and put together. Other than getting your correct fabrics in the correct spots in that diagram, everything about this quilt is actually super fast. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I will show you what mine turned out like when I get all these borders put on. And also I'll show you some others that different folks have made over the last few years. This is a really popular quilt just because it's a lot of fun to make. Have a great day and happy quilting.